Welcome to Hortculture, where a group of extension professionals and plant people talk about the business, production, and joy of planting seeds and helping them grow. Join us as we explore the culture of horticulture. Hello, friends. My question for you today is, have you gorged yourself on watermelon to the point of making yourself sick yet, or are you normal?
Nope,
No.
I have not. Now,
So Ray's normal. Okay.
Cantaloupe is a different story, but not watermelon. I'm not a watermelon person, so
Not a big watermelon
person. Melon. We could just say melon in general. I feel like melon.
That covers a lot of ground. So yeah, I'm good with that.
We've been getting like a watermelon a week, and it doesn't make it through like the weekend. And Tyler's like, "Why are we?" And I'm like, "Because it's watermelon season, and we just sit there and we just eat it. We just. I mean, it's not probably best, but it's also delightful." So
I used to eat a lot of watermelon when we grew those. Like beside the tobacco patch, we had a big, huge, long strip, and we grew. It was just wide enough for watermelon, so we grew them. We didn't really sell them or anything, but then I would just like go and crack one open like an animal, and just had a spoon in the truck dash, and that was my watermelon spoon. It was a big like tablespoon thing, and I would just scoop out the watermelon and eat it. And I remember there's like the little sweet baby watermelons or whatever.
So you're telling me that you're not a watermelon guy, but then you immediately have a story about having a watermelon.
I am telling you that, like green beans growing up, I used to be a green bean guy. And I used to be a watermelon guy to a great extent, maybe in excess.
Wow, okay.
But now the only thing I've never gotten tired of like that I loved growing up, and I still love to this very day, for some reason, tomatoes stuck. I ate lots of fresh tomatoes, but for some reason I still love tomatoes, and pork rinds, yes. There is no immunity to pork rinds. There's no resistance.
Sausages.
Yes, and Vienna sausages, the Appalachian treats we like to call them. Thank you for pronouncing that correctly, Brett. I love that pronunciation. That was dead on. But watermelon, I don't know. Jennifer doesn't understand. She says, "How can you not like want a big watermelon?" I'll go by and have a little slice or whatever. But
you'll dabble.
Yeah, just a little bit, a little nibble.
Ray, you're so wholesome. The wild travails of excess of your youth entailed green beans and watermelons. Yes. And you just said, "You know what? I lived, I learned, and now I'm just going to have a slice."
I'm going to moderate that. It's not like peaches. I'm not going to go overboard on that, Brett. I'm just going to have, and now it's more in moderation. Alexis is eating them out of the field, apparently. So
I listen. When I am so sweaty that it just feels like I've been in a pool, but I still have clothes on, which is a horrible feeling. And I come in and I'm cranky and I'm hot and I'm dripping, and pulling a cold, already cut up watermelon out of the fridge and just basically in the refrigerator light, just eating as much as I can stand is. Like, that is my Roman Empire.
That is your pinnacle of consumption.
Because I'm hydrating myself. It's mostly water anyways. And then my belly is full, and I am just
you don't have to defend it. There's no moral judgment here.
I've made myself sick on watermelon before, got violently ill because too much. Like, I didn't know when I was like very young, you shouldn't eat the rind. Like, you shouldn't eat the green. It was so good. I ate maybe a little bit too much of the white into the rind. Wait,
I don't know that I've had it where the rind is good. Is that
no, it wasn't good. I just kept eating.
Okay. You were just on. You
just didn't stop.
Yeah. I just kept going, and I was like. Yeah, my nose would get sore because I would like eat the watermelon, and my nose would kind of rub the watermelon. But talking about guilty pleasures off the vine, Brett, what's yours that you just can't resist when it's in season?
Well, this is well-trod territory that I in the past had to ask, how many peaches might one eat in a reasonable setting, and then like where do we reach a worrisome amount? And so peaches for me are one of those definitive in season, the bear that comes across the fruit tree and just goes ham until they pass out under the tree. And
that's you.
That's me.
You think it's the fleeting nature of peaches, because peaches aren't something you can just sit out for weeks at a time. And is that it, or just the sheer sugar and the taste, or all the things?
It's all, I think it is the short period of time of availability, that scarcity kind of vibe. I
Yeah.
think it is the flavor and all of that. But I also I just have a really strong associations of peaches. When I was a kid, when my mom was really liked peaches, and every summer we would have some, and it was we had canned peaches year round, and so that was probably one of the fruits that I ate the most in general. But man, and it's also like like a good apple, it doesn't get
Mhm.
soft like that. It tastes really
Yeah.
good, but like you don't ideally you don't want to have a soft apple. You want it to
Right.
have a little crunch to it, a little firmness. But there's just something about the like texture of that soft peach as it is in that perfect ripe moment. I don't know. I'm a
Like
romantic. What
nature's
can I say?
candy. I
I'm
mean,
Yeah,
romantic.
the peaches are the romantic fruit, so there you go.
Okay,
yeah.
I can
That's
see
what the
that.
I'm trying
emoji
not to use the
suggests.
word sensual here because we don't wanna go there, but I did. I went there.
Yeah,
I mean, I could see that with peaches. I mean, there's not too many people that you'll talk to that say, "Ugh, peaches." No.
yeah. Like the
My
song goes.
husband does
Know
not
what I
like
mean?
peaches.
Peaches and
Does
cream.
not? What?
He does not like peach flavor, he does not like peaches. No,
Well,
Is there
big
some
negative for me.
backstory?
Tyler doesn't strike me as I'm using the word a capital R, so in the sense of like the poets. He doesn't strike me as a romantic. He strikes me as a pragmatist. Not in the
That
like
would
Valentine's Day flowers, but more in the like, you know,
mm.
carpe diem, oh
He's not
captain,
in
my
his soft girl
captain.
era, that's for sure. No.
He's in his what?
He's not in his soft girl era, that's for sure.
Okay.
Is that past or that's forthcoming?
I think it's coming. I think it's on its
I can
way.
feel it.
Waiting for the
I can
slow
feel it.
erosion of time.
Well, I'm
His
I'm
soft
kind of
girl
curious.
era.
So as we think about as we workshop Tyler's rebrand, I'm
We'll
curious.
work on
I'm
this.
curious from you all, and Alexis, you have done the homework ahead of time, so you have a little bit of a cheat. So maybe you have to make it harder on yourself. But Ray, if you were to build a brand, let's say around Ray, not so much like a personal brand in like the cheesy business way, like business sense where it's like I'm promoting myself. But if you were selling stuff and you yourself were going to be a key part of that marketing, what do you
Mhm.
think would be some of the elements that would be a part of that?
If I'm
Like would
part
it
of the
be
process, that I would
would it
want
be
that to be front
professional?
and
Would it be down home? Would it be yeah.
no, I mean, as far as the general vibe check of that, it would probably be somewheres in the middle. I wouldn't want it to be sterile. Not that I'm associated in professionalism with sterility, but I would probably
Mhm.
have it to where my family's involvement in the process of whatever I was doing, I would want that to be part of the story because I think, at least from my own personal experiences, I want myself to be part of the mythology of the product. I wanted it
Mm.
to be part of the origin story. And I think that's a very powerful thing. And I've thought a lot about that.
What is
And
that?
that's something.
What are the mythologies there for you?
If it's an operation that has some kind of family underpinnings or some story that's interesting there, I want to say that up front. First and foremost, you have to have a great product. That's kind of we're just assuming that. But as far as the things beyond the product, I like to know the story of things.
Mm.
That's the sociologist part of my brain that wants to. I mean, at a time where products are readily available, why do people shop and purchase what they do? And even the big brands, it seems like some of the more contemporary research on big brands, these huge multinational brands, it's like, well, people want story and connectivity, even on those brands. But if you're a local brand, that's something that you have built in. And I
Mm.
think I'd want that to be part of the story
Mm.
Mm.
of why I'm doing, how I'm doing, and how that translates into my end product and the philosophy of why I'm doing it. I think that's just something that you can do if you're a smaller operation. That would be my angle. Would be
Mm.
more towards the roots end of things, for lack of a better
Mhm.
term. I don't know, Brett, what would that be called? But more kind of the ground level
Yeah, an
stuff.
authenticity, a certain sense of place and
Yeah,
connection and legacy and
yeah,
time
yeah.
passing.
I would tend
I think
to
those
veer towards that.
well, that
Also,
tends to do well in Kentucky. They love that.
mm,
You're from
Mhm.
yeah,
somewhere else and you wanna start something new? Well, we'll see about that, but, long-term root, yeah, that plays well.
But I know that, if you have a product, then the other side of my brain is over there, which is not the story that you would tell, but it's like the mechanics behind, the who, what, when, and where, and the pricing and all that's got to be in place. I realize that, but I like to know the story behind things. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had we do this presentation, or this set of presentations through our CCD team. And we did one this spring, and we're going to hopefully do another one this fall, a 6-week series. And we just talk about marketing, and marketing for all is what the name of the general program is. But this one's kind of a more intensive one. And we talk about a variety of things. We talk about photography. We talk about graphic design, web design, selling online. But also we try to start with this conversation around brand. And I come back to it over and over again. And and I realize it's a difficult question, but it's kind of like the fundamental one, the one that you kind of got to answer to some extent, get a certain sense of what that looks like up front, so that everything else that you build works with that, and it kind of helps to promote that same message. So that's kind of why I'm curious. Alexis, do you, either from the formation of Wild Roots, or from just if you were gonna start a third, fourth, fifth thing that you were gonna spin on, I've lost count at this point, but if you were gonna no longer sleep at all anymore, and would there be a different, a way of branding it that you would like to explore that maybe either you can't do within your Wild Roots stuff, or
Yeah,
what is the
I
Wild
mean,
Roots brand, I guess, maybe first?
I like to think about it as like relatable professionalism. I mean, that's the way, like, in my mind, how I do it, but I don't know if it's always received that way. So it's not that we don't ever tell our story or, anything like that. I just think my nature of wanting to teach people comes across in a way of, like, it's not necessarily about, my background and where I'm from, but more about like what I'm doing now and how that relates to you and what you can like pull from that or learn from that or how it benefits you or something along those lines. And I think that just comes from years and extension of teaching people things like why they should do something the way we say to do them. So I think, and then just like a trust. So I think with cut flowers being relatively new, a relatively new crop for Kentucky people to buy locally. Like, don't go buy it from your big box store, buy it from the farmer's market. So I think there is uh, a stand that I have made to make sure people are understanding the differences, the different types of cultivars, why you would want to buy something local in that way, and just how to have the most success with it, because it's not the same stuff that they're seeing. So I think that I have taken that route just by nature, or at least that's what I think I have done. So on that, and I don't know, I enjoy that. I think I'm the type of person who will tell, if you ask a question, I will most likely tell you anything about myself, but it's not necessarily putting myself out there. I think that comes from having a police officer as a father. It was kind of like you keep your personal stuff a little bit closer to the chest, right? But I think that's where that comes from. But I like to teach people things. So I want them to know that it's not always easy. So I think my relatability comes from saying like, yeah, hey, I also have a bunch of weeds and I also really am struggling, and just that you're kind of not alone in the industry that way. And that, farmers, no matter what they have, whether it's cattle or they're on a combine or, they're cutting hay or picking watermelons, they're all experiencing the hardships and the successes that come with farming. And so just really trying to share that with the public, I think, has been sort of my brand, whether I initially meant that or not. And also what I do is very artistic, right? So you kind of have to share that artsy vibe as well. I think if I was gonna do it again, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if I would do it differently. I think that's who I am as a person, and to try to do something um, more or different would not be authentic to me and the small business I'm trying to portray. So I think authenticity whatever that looks like for you is the most important, because you can see that, right? Like you can see that in a brand, I think.
Well, you mentioned brand and vibe, but when I think about, a big field of cantaloupes, we
Mhm.
talked a lot about that because they're tasty. But the vibe there may be different than like flower farming, because flower farming is one
Mhm.
of those endeavors, like a lot of things, but more so than most other things I think about, has a definite like lane or vibe.
Yeah, that's
It
true.
seems like, I mean, it definitely does. To me, when I see, maybe it's just the colors, maybe it just lends
Yeah,
itself
how you
naturally.
photograph and portray it is gonna probably be different.
Photography seems to be really interesting, and just it's kind of like going to an RV park after hours. Everybody's setting up their campfires and sitting around the campfire. There's like nobody unhappy there. There's nobody unhappy in flower farming. I know there's
No.
lots of struggle, and it's farming, and
It's like,
I don't always
mm.
see that, but I know that that's there. I know it's there, but it's got such a kind of a
That's
colorful
true, yeah.
vibe
Yeah,
to
yeah,
flower farming.
that's
I've just
probably why
noticed.
it's becoming so popular, is because there is this vibe of, like, I'm gonna be in a sun hat outside and my, cute dress harvesting and stuff. So, yeah, yeah, I see that. This it's a
Is the vibe the
homesteading vibe.
brand? Is that what you're talking about, Brett? Like, is the vibe, does that translate to brand, or do you have to be more deliberate and consistent to develop
Yeah.
a brand?
Well, I think that that's it's an interesting question. I think that there's different ways of communicating it. And part of that is has to do with whether, like, how you're visually representing stuff. So that's
Mhm,
Mhm.
things, elements within your brand, like your colors or your logo or your packet, different packets of information or whatever you want to say.
mhm,
But then there's also like the way that you create spaces and like your tone of your communication, whether that be in person
mhm,
or the writing, or like so it is kind of, to me, it's a blend of physical real assets with graphical intention behind them, and then also the like vibe, so-called vibe side of things. And I think that
Mhm.
creating that, it's difficult. And I'm glad you mentioned, Alexis, the idea of it evolving over time,
Mhm.
and that,
Yeah.
but I think that you probably started with something, some
Oh,
intention.
yeah, totally started from, like, a super professional, I want people to think I know what I'm doing route, and then realizing that, yes, you wanna attract people to your professionalism, but also you want them to see you, because box stores are also very professional, right? So, like, why come to you over some other place? And that's where that relatability, authenticity, I think, started to seep in.
Yeah. Well, so I have a. We could talk about brand photography, but we can talk about something else, or talk about it at another time too. Actually, so part of the MFA, the Marketing for All program, in the first presentation week, whatever, we try to ask people this question. And so I'm just curious. I'm going to run down this one worksheet that we worked through. Um, and you tell me, which of these do you tend to gravitate more
Mhm.
toward? So and it could be that some products or some contexts you tend toward one or the other. Um, on a scale from personable to professional, and maybe you don't see these as opposite, but go with it for the sake of the argument. Personal versus professional, personable versus professional. Is there certain brands or certain concepts or things that you need to that you feel like you gravitate toward one of those more than the other?
Depends on, I guess, for me, the situation. If I were a grower growing something and they ask me about the product, I'm gonna be pretty professional with my answers, and I'm gonna know, the variety or whatever they're asking about, but you're gonna have to be personable in general, I guess. Alexis,
Mhm.
I'll kick this to you. I mean, I guess it depends
Yeah,
on the
I would
scenario.
say, um I would say that I lean more towards, like, if we're just talking about me putting myself out there, I'm gonna lean more towards professional over personal, just slightly askew towards the more professional, side of things. Where Ray, I see you just if the middle is 0 and I'm a plus, a -1, you're a +1, where you are very, your vibe is still like, I know what I'm talking about, but you can talk about it in such a more relaxed way, I think, than I can.
Yeah, there's an interesting gender dynamic there, and age dynamic, but
Oh,
gender in particular that I think,
yeah.
that young women sometimes struggle,
Mm,
unfortunately and unjustly, to be taken seriously or to be treated as a
mhm,
professional or to be trusted. And old white guys like me are constantly trying to break down being treated, being interpreted as stiff or professional or
mhm.
overly whatever. And so there's an opportunity there. I remember that came up when I was in college, where some of the older white male professors would be like, "Call me, Doug or whatever my name is."
Yeah,
And then the female professors would be like, "Oh, I kind of want to be called Dr. Smith or
yeah.
whatever." And I was like, "Oh, that makes total sense of
Mhm.
an unfortunate reality there." I think there's also things too where it depends on the product that you're selling. I don't know that everybody wants a super personable dentist or heart surgeon. It's like I would like for my teeth to be nice to me, but
Yeah.
and at the same time, if you're a bartender, maybe being super stiff and professional at the dive bar is not necessarily something that you're gonna bring to that work. I won't go through all of these, but I will say, I'm curious on the idea of like how balancing upscaleness versus
Mm,
accessibility to everybody. That I just mentioned the dive bar as kind of the classic example of the approachable, so to speak. But I
mhm.
think in the local foods world, sometimes we fall into this trap of which one are we
Totally.
going after? What target customers are we targeting? What is our price point?
Wow. The
Yeah, what do y'all think
Mhm.
about
customers
that?
dictate a lot of that. I mean, if I were selling to a wholesaler, which, we did in the past, our family, like the professional end. But if I'm selling to an end consumer, I represent myself on a different level, direct to
Mhm.
consumer. And it also, this sounds weird, but it also depends on the crop that I'm selling. If it were a newer crop, Alexis mentioned cut flowers, and that you want to be seen that it's more than just hobby growing flowers. There's a
Mhm.
lot that goes into this, a lot of science, a lot of effort, a lot of intention. And then you may want to be seen as more professional. You're a
Mhm.
professional, grower of this one item. So it really depends on the customer. I mean, like
Yeah.
I'd fall into different lanes depending on the customer. Maybe that wholesaler doesn't care how, the family pictures and, how much I
Mm.
love watering them in the mornings or all of that details. They just want a good quality, consistent product. But
And with
yeah.
local food, like, thinking about, there's this, I think there's sometimes this idea that it's, way more expensive. And so if it's a way more expensive product, then I'm marketing to people with a lot of money, and people with a lot of money are professionals. So I have to come across as professional, which is obviously not always the case in any way. And, why are we only marketing or putting professional out there when everybody eats, right? And so there's, from an accessibility standpoint, thinking about that is interesting, too. And really who your target is. And and like, again, cut flowers is an easy one to say, or if you're in the nursery industry or something like that, a lot of those things are excess, right? That's not something you need to survive, so you are marketing to a clientele with more disposable funds to put in a new hydrangea plant, or some trees out front, or whatever that is. And so I think there's a tendency to come across more professional for those groups, even whether it's warranted or not.
I see
Yeah.
people flip back and forth, and it's really cool between those modes, and I believe that's just all part of it. Especially if you're selling in different avenues,
Mhm.
ground level versus go all the way up through like pure wholesale. I mean, it's different skill sets as far as how you're conveying the information and the product.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of different ways. Ray, you were getting at earlier. Is it just sort of the vibe? How do you create the vibe? How do
Mm-hmm.
you develop that? And I think one of the things we talk about, and you all mentioned it already, is the importance of photos in
Mm-hmm.
basically everything about branding
Yeah,
Yeah.
now. I mean, I think it's been important before, but I think especially as the quality of the little cameras that we carry around in our
it's
pockets at all
incredible. Yeah.
times has gone up. some of the expectations about the quality of the photos that we take with them have also gone up. I think that much of, like, especially in the direct marketing world, a lot of the social media stuff, obviously Instagram, you can't post without a picture or a video of some sort. You could still do that on something like Facebook, but not recommended. Engagement tends to be very low on just text only posts. And so I think, all that's things that people maybe already knew or already know, but one of the things we emphasize, and the reason we even started talking about the branding stuff in the first place, is starting with a little bit of clear understanding of that messaging, and then letting it kind of carry forward to, so what do I take pictures of, or how do I even
Yeah.
want to stage and frame the pictures? And I'm curious, does anything pop to mind based on the branding angles that you all said, of like, is there colors? Is there, some sort of lighting? Is there some sort of subject matter? What do you think about as you start to think about a good
I
photo?
think it's scale and subject matter. And I got an interesting story there. In college, I took some classes, and that was in ye olden days, where we actually developed our film and went on to do some studio photography. And then we, did some like galleries, art galleries, me and a group of folks did. But it was very interesting, and I love landscapes. That was my thing. I loved Ansel Adams, and I loved black and white landscapes, and I loved the scale, big sweeping scales. But I noticed when we would have like these small art shows at Berea years ago, that a landscape portrait would elicit a completely different response than something smaller in scale, such as a candid, photograph of someone in a crowd experiencing an emotion. And I got this appreciation that there is a difference between scale and subject. And I guess that's the difference to me in this conversation would be the picture of a field of cantaloupes versus a child holding a tomato, enjoying that juicy tomato. But I mean, all of that matters. And it does. And I noticed, all those years ago that elicits a different sort of interest, a different sort of response. And there's a lot that goes into that. And photographers know all of this stuff, that, all of those things are important depending on what you're trying to convey. The feeling, I guess, the vibe, the
So
feeling
do you think
that you're
both
trying
of
to
those
convey.
photos would have a place in your marketing of the brand that you sort of talked about earlier?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Overview versus a daily post. The overview would be a nice picture of a beautiful field, a farm, or flowers, or whatever. It could be a foundation photo, whereas the more candid, intimate photographs that are closer up in subject matter would be your dailies, your constant post. I don't know. Am I off base here like Alexis? I know
No,
you do lots
I
of
think that's really
really cool
cool, right?
posts.
I got really excited because like that I think very clearly um talks about like our different ends of the brand, where your daily would be a little bit more candid, and then you'd have, these overarching, beautiful photos of a landscape or the melon field or whatever. Mine
Mm-hmm.
is the exact opposite. And so my everyday photos are just, close up photos of a bug or, a
Mm-hmm.
flower field or whatever. And then my more, once a week type photos are something with like a face in it. I just say a face. It's not always my face. It could
Mm-hmm.
be a kid holding, a bouquet or whatever. And that's, I think, really speaks to, could be the cat, the difference in brand. And I recently said this to my husband, and I said, I want you to take a picture of this big bunch of flowers, and they were the focus. But I said, you need to get my face in it a little bit. And he was like,
Yes.
why? And I said, because that's my jump. Like that's that like
Mm-hmm.
jump starts my social media of having a face in it,
Mm-hmm.
or the dog in it or something like that. And so mine is the opposite, where I'm like really trying to push a visual product. I'm putting that
Yeah.
out there a lot more often, but then I'm
Yeah.
putting a face in it to bring that back to, this could be you, right? This is a real tangible thing. But that's just my personal style is where it's different from
Well, and
yours.
you also said something there, and my professor in college would always say, "Well, be careful of photo fatigue." That means, if you
Mhm.
love landscapes, that you can't just do that. And that was before social media. But talking about, people will look at the first 3 out of 10 and then kind of get
Mhm.
fatigued, and their brain starts to take shortcuts, and they'll move on to the next section of
That's a
the
good point.
gallery. But what you
Yeah.
just said was, you're doing pictures, you're doing photographs,
Mhm.
but they're varied. Some are
Yeah.
faces, some may be pets, some may be products, but the really important concept, and he always stressed that, he said you have to avoid mental shortcuts and fatigue in photography if you're doing, like, you have a series of
Yeah.
pictures, and that
And different
applies, I think, today.
angles,
Yes. Depth of
different angles to
field.
look at something. Yeah.
Mhm.
Do you take a picture of the braided garlic hanging on the wall? Do you take a picture of the garlic in the
Mhm.
ground? It's might be all the same product, but it's down lower or up
You
higher
can't
or
just take
something like
pictures, I
that.
guess, of the product, even though they're beautiful. The flowers are beautiful. I guess
Yeah.
after the 30th flower, you're like, "Oh,
Right, right. It's
someone may
just a
miss
flower.
something." Yeah, that's an interesting
There's
point.
not it's not relatable, right? So it's
Yeah.
that aspect of it. Mhm.
Well, I
Yeah,
think
that's a good
just to
point.
kind of tie together what you were saying. So, Alexis, you are tending to predominantly be professional product and education with a
Mhm.
sprinkling of that personability in one
Mhm.
way or another. And that could be
Right.
strategic in terms of get a little bit of my face in it, but also it could be that you have, occasionally that more candid thing. And then Ray,
Yeah.
you had said that your brand, thinking about it leading with personability and kind of personal story and connection back to place, so that's your predominant thing, and then you sprinkle in some of the more meta business,
Yeah.
and that's I think that blend of or that spectrum that you were pointed out, Alexis, is really important. It's one that people um, we tend to see the people in Kentucky fall on that spectrum somewhere,
Mhm.
and I think a couple of the things that can actually very basic tips for good photos. One is to think about what your product is and make sure you're representing it well and accurately. I mean, that
Mhm.
is a very basic.
Yeah.
There's a guy I watch who does some marketing analysis, and talks about advertisements, and there'll be these big, huge budget Super Bowl ads or something like equivalent, and he points out, he's like, there is almost no feature of the product in the ad. And
Mhm.
especially if it's for something people aren't familiar with, or especially if it's for a new brand or a new business or a small business, there's not really getting around the fact that you should be featuring your product and what you're trying to sell as kind of the crown jewel of all the things. And sometimes we get caught up in being overthinking things too much, but take good pictures of your good stuff. Post that as a strategy can work quite well. Um, and I think that thinking about those branding considerations as a secondary piece to that, supporting that isn't yeah, it's a good strategy.
Mhm.
So Alexis, I think understanding what your product is in the first place is kind of challenging because you might sell people. I will ask people sometimes at presentations, "What do you sell?" And they'll say tomatoes, or they'll say flowers, and I will say, in fact, your product is a locally grown, vine
Mhm.
ripened from your county heirloom tomato. And I
Mhm.
say that not to be pedantic, but to in some way offer opportunities for what we would call differentiation. And I think that's another part of storytelling with photos and with branding in general, is to think about how is this product different and how can I, communicate that.
Mhm.
You'll have any thoughts about like how to make something different, to show something is different in a photo
That's
or in
the story of marketing, yeah. Yeah. Trying to figure out the, not in a bad way, but trying to figure out the angle and convey that
Mhm.
effectively. I don't know, Alexis, if you have some variegated or some sport or some amazing version of something. If someone had a flower that was just totally unique, I guess you would lean hard into that if you were.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so I'll give an example. I'm growing, for the first time ever, I'm super excited about it, tulip gingers this year. And that's not a very popular flower in Kentucky. I'm sure
Yeah,
is somebody listening who has maybe grown them, but for the sake of it, very
they're
new.
unique.
And
They're
so I'm
unique
giving it a
for
shot.
Kentucky.
And so I'm using that as a sprinkling, as an interest piece, but you have, sticking to the things that people know, but you can update that. So yes, they're used to getting bouquets, but I might do a special, hey, the bouquets have tulip gingers in them this week because the week before I did like a little educational thing on it. And then the week before that, it was, exciting, they're coming up. And the month before that, it was me planting them. So there's a little bit of a story going along with that. Of that relatability of taking people through the process, but it's still focusing on like the end product of like what I'm trying to sell. And so I think that is at the heart of it, and you just figure out new ways. And if you're not growing a new crop, that's okay. It could be, something new you're trellising. It could be just the full story that you've never shown people before. It doesn't have to be, well, I have to grow something new every year so people are excited. No, it could be a new recipe. It could be something, but it ultimately brings people back to that product that you are trying to sell or market, I think.
Yeah, something I would suggest is that some part, we talked about how featuring the product itself is never a bad idea, but featuring the product and then what are the contextual things around that product in the photo. So for instance, I may harvest a bunch of green beans, and I have the option to take and put those green beans in a container, sit them on a stark white table, and take a picture of that and post and say, green beans are here. What does that tell me about any of the things associated with those green beans? As
Totally.
compared to a picture of me and my grandson harvesting those green beans, as opposed to a dish where somebody's prepared the green beans, or grandma and me sitting on the porch snapping the beans to prepare them. And I think in each of those cases, you're either telling the story of there's a human producing this and you're buying straight from the human who's producing it. There's an element of the legacy or the historical and cultural importance of this particular type of thing or type of item. I think also, like with the flower thing. So if you're trying to sell your product as a super high-end professional product that can compete with florists and other types of businesses like that, then the down home, put the bouquet on the bale of hay, and it's really kind of golden, washed out, light, bright out, doesn't necessarily communicate that.
Sure.
And instead, you might want to get into almost like studio lighting, and you might actually want to pay a photographer even to take some of those pictures. And that is part of, again, communicating. And if you have this brand, and Alexis, you mentioned like with yours, over time it's developed. Part of the developing is you start to figure out what you're good at. You start to figure out what you like, what other people like, and then you start to really double down on that. But the less that you can be competing with your own attempt, like your
right.
I want to do this with my branding, and then you create a photo or post a photo that directly competes with that idea.
Yeah.
It really can undercut versus supporting. And
that was always like for me, and I'll give you a veg example as well. But like when I started growing cut flowers, and there's nothing wrong with this, but my brand, I did not want to be the burlap, what I called the burlap and lace brand. And there's nothing wrong with that brand. But I wasn't going to put flowers on a hay bale. I wasn't going, am I going to show the farm? Sure. But that was not the brand. That was not the types of flowers I wanted to grow. Similar to if you're growing a specialty heirloom, a specialty, cherry that you're wanting to sell to high end restaurants, versus everyday, canners. Again, there's nothing wrong with either end of those spectrum, but you're going to show those photos differently. You're going to show them in a nice recipe. You're going to show them with lots of color in them versus, a nice canned or grandma canning or whatever that is. There's no wrong answer here, but pick a lane. And then, if you come, I went harder, if 0 is the very middle between relatable versus professional, I went pretty hard towards professional and just slowly back down to that like middle 0 mark as I saw and developed. But that's a great example.
Yeah. And I think, one of the things that sometimes with just marketing and branding, sometimes people feel like it's like athleticism, it's something you're born with or you're not. It's just an ability that you have or you don't.
Like it's creativity you're born with. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not true. There's different people who have different types of creativity. But one thing that I have learned is that the vast majority of marketing, like the behind the scenes of it, is extremely contrived and not boring necessarily, but verging on boring. It's like a logistical process.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
you're running a
thinking, I need
process. Yeah.
X on Monday, X on Tuesday, X on
Consistency.
and
Just
and
it's there.
it comes across to the customer as, "Oh my gosh," and you mentioned Ray earlier, there's nobody ever unhappy on a flower farm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's part of the goal is you don't want your
Hash
product
that
to be
in.
associated with human pain or, some
Let's get
other
away from the funeral flowers, will we? Yes.
Yeah.
any other kind of pain, I guess, for that matter. And so to that end, one practical thing I think that, we recommend and thinking about as you make that jump from brand to photos is allow yourself to be a bit contrived. And the way to do that is to use something that we just call it a shot list, but it's just think about what you want to take
Mhm.
pictures of, write it down, and then go and take those pictures and do that. And
Mhm.
what that will allow you to do is it doesn't have to make everything feel spontaneous. You don't have to wait for the right moment for things to happen. You just create the opportunity, and it's an important part of your task list, just like watering or planting or harvesting.
Mhm.
And you just turn it into a chore.
Yeah.
And so you go and do that. And so just some examples of a shot list that we came up with would be to, and this you just again would write these down. You go out and collect them, and then you have them in your
Mhm.
bank of photos to use for your branding. Maybe something like an overhead or a panoramic shot of the farm itself, like a really wide view. That was kind of what Ray was talking about with the cantaloupe. Maybe the farmer, you, someone else in the field tending to the crops, working
Mhm.
on them. You have that kind of action shot. Some close ups of hands. Those hands could be seeding, they could be harvesting, they could be preparing food, they could be selling at the market. Um, a close up of the produce, that's kind of a straightforward one where, in a given context and think about the lighting and all that kind of stuff. This isn't like a how to do photos, it's just thinking about your photos a little more
Mhm.
strategically. um, Doing some farmer portraits can be fun to have it be almost like an American Gothic style or something kind of fun in that regard. It can also be more informal, like Alexis was talking about, with the picture you're holding the product, but you're in it too, smiling or proud or whatever you are. Couple of others, you might have like your products, like the showcase of all your products within a given, either maybe you have a retail environment, or maybe you're taking it to a chef and you want to show them a picture, show them, what you have available, and you've sort of set up this cornucopia kind of vibe with a really, nicely lit area. That might be something you might want to, include there. Let's see here if there's any other particular ones. I think I'm curious about your all's thoughts on this. There is a tendency sometimes and to talk about or to share the so-called farming warts and all, show the
Mhm.
fails, show the not so cool, the irrigation line blew up, or I've been up all night with the calves, or whatever. What do you
Mhm.
all think of that? Like, when you see that, does that have cachet with you? What do you think about customers? Do you think that what's the
I
vibe
like
on
it
that?
because I mean that can be artistic too, and a simple picture of a blown line and done in such a way, framed out in such a way that can tell a pretty powerful story of,
Mhm.
the realness and the struggle of, that's behind the product. That flower farming is not totally easy. It's not all butterflies and sunshiny days and walks through the farm. It's, irrigation and it's weeds but I think
Mhm.
that's all part of the story. And that's one of the things I love. Those moments, good and bad. It's just part of the story.
Yeah, I am for it. I think it can be done strategically, and again, that's specifically talking about, like, my brand, um, where you wanna be real with people, but also, um, you know, people want to live that dream, I think, a little bit with you, and so you don't wanna overwhelm them with all
Yeah.
the negativity, because it can be especially with flowers, but I think farming in general for a lot of people looks like a beautiful life. And it is. It just um they want to live that dream and they want to support your dream. And so you can't constantly be inundating them with the negatives. And I think that's the beauty of like stories. If we're talking specifically social media, stories disappear within 24 hours. And so you can post some of those things that are, happening
I
regularly,
like
the,
that it goes away.
yeah, the irrigation that blows up, the
Yeah.
the very day-to-day little stuff you can post on there, and then the actual quote unquote permanent posts that are going to stay in a feed that you want people to maybe interact with, that are negative. I always try to make them relatable, like hey, look, your farmer still has weed problems. Hey, look, they also lose calves, or their chickens get got by them raccoons, or it's a way to make it relatable, and remind people that you are a real person that is doing this. But I think letting them live the dream with you is important, and what keeps them coming back to look at your stuff and see what's available. So I think you just be strategic, be honest, but be strategic.
Well, some of this, I mean, you used to be just, I guess, in the early days, you had a permanent website. Pictures were permanent as long as you had them
Mm-hmm.
up. But now it's so platform specific that some
Mm-hmm.
things and that's to speak to your point, Alexis, some things lend themselves to a, temporary story or a temporary photo that goes away after a given amount of time. And some are more permanent sort of things
Mm-hmm.
that are the backbone of whatever you're trying to do. And that
Yeah.
takes a whole different set of considerations, and that's platform specific.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on, and that just adds another layer to the cake. I mean, if you're being very deliberate, and I think people that do a pretty good job at that, they're good at the platform that they're using and getting the word out. And we have a
Mm-hmm.
couple of operations, our bigger operations in my county. They have people on the farm, on the family, just whatever, that are dedicated to social media, that I
Mm-hmm.
feel like they do a good job. There's people that are responsible, Brett, for running the process week in and week out. And they laugh and they're like, oh my gosh, and they have a bunch of photos that they'll take. They're like, oh, we got to post, make sure we post this week, or we're going to be on vacation. I'm sure, Alexis, when you're on vacation, there's still posts happening, I bet.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
scheduled, and like
The, sh-
Emily on
the
our
show goes
team,
on. Yeah.
Never
yeah, for
stop,
CCD
never
schedules stuff
sleeps.
out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, in
And
case
all of
you
those
aren't
are,
aware, you can schedule posts on the
Mm-hmm.
Meta Business Suite for both Instagram
yeah.
and Facebook. So
Mm-hmm.
if you thought up until now, which there are still some people who do that, there's no shade on that because you live a blessed life of not being baptized in the
Yeah,
algorithm.
really.
But uh, yeah, not most posts that you see were not taken and posted extemporaneously, off the cuff. They were in fact
Yeah.
contrived. They were planned, maybe even days or weeks ago.
Yeah.
So that's how and why that
And
kind
if
of
you
thing plays
if you
out.
are if you are in the world of like, you're like, okay, shot list is a really good idea, and like, yeah, in a perfect world I'm going to do that. I have personally refined that down to that seems more manageable to me as I'm taking photos, to like these tiers or these sections of what I want in my feed each week. And so one might be a personal shot, and so that's going to be like a face of a pet or a me or a somebody, right, with my product.
Mhm.
A very product specific shot, and then there's going to be one that's more general. Maybe it's a wide shot, maybe it's just a bunch of, it's just really pretty flowers in the photo, or the really pretty pile of eggplants or whatever that is. And so I have these like kind of three tiers, and as long as my shot fits within those three tiers I've identified for my brand, then it's a good shot to take, and it'll be useful, quickly. And so that's kind of the way I've thought about it, just because. But shotless, I definitely started with that, and that is really helpful, I think, when you get started. But once you kind of get that down, you can sort of decide what are those tiers for you, and that helps figure out what you should photograph.
Yeah, I think that the shot list thing is a good starting point, and it's good for people
Yeah,
who have zero, like no marketing bone in
totally.
their body, but they want to do it.
Totally.
It kind of turns it into
Yes.
more like an engineering task than a
Yeah.
Mhm.
marketing task per se. And I also think, when you're starting, or if you haven't done a good job so far of capturing pictures, that's okay. It helps you to build up a library. And so in the early
Mhm.
days, you may be going out and taking 30, 40, 50, 100 plus photos that you can now have in your, in for the off season, or you can have them, available to
Absolutely.
use. But then as you move forward with your business, like you're talking about, Alexis, you have this, you want to be capturing content that's more dynamic. It's more like from now,
And
as opposed.
in the moment, a little bit
Yeah.
more in the moment that you can share. And I would encourage you that, like, if you're on social media and struggling, or even websites and you're struggling to know what to put on there, go find ones that have good shots and be like, oh, well, I can take my version of that. I love the way they stacked everything up and the sun was setting in the background. Well, I can throw a table outside and put my daily harvest in it, and, situate my table so that the sun is setting in the background, or whatever that is. Pick those things out. I know sometimes it can feel like you're copying someone. I would say don't necessarily copy the farm that's right down the road from you, or you do and you say, loved this shot from, so we'll use Jessica's the Besson family farm. I love this shot, wanted to recreate it with our eggplants where, maybe they did beef or something. But you can also use that. That's community building and helping out. But it's okay. It's like nothing is, I feel like nothing is really new. I mean, that's probably pessimistic to say, but it's okay if you may take a same shot as somebody else that you admire, and you can say, hey, love this shot, wanted to recreate it for us. And that's all right to do. And I think sometimes they're like, I don't want to copy anybody else. Well, we're all just trying to make it, and none of these ideas are new. So
Well, I think in general, if you're, it's often true that, like, in the world of investment or in the world of evaluating businesses, it's often the most boring businesses are the ones that actually are the ones that don't think too far outside the box are often the most valuable in the long term. They may not be the sexiest. They may not make a big splash. It reminds me of in Parks and Rec, where Tom Haverford wants to open a restaurant, and Ben Wyatt, the stand-in for me in this situation, says, what if you opened a company that sold dry cleaning fluids to dry cleaning businesses? And he's like, I've run all the numbers and it works really well and it would be a really good. And Tom's like, I want to have a restaurant. It's like that kind of thing where it's the same way with the marketing, I think, where sometimes we have a desire to be too different and to reinvent the wheel too much. And whereas degrees of difference can make it seem different, that is in the cosmic scheme is the difference between cut flower business A and Kentucky and cut flower B, both of which are successful. Is it really that different in the grand cosmic scheme? No, but between those two, there's enough differences that you can kind of figure out what they are. And I would say, just to answer my own question about the warts and all thing, I think it really depends. And I am not always a fan of that. And here's the reason why.
Yeah.
And I think this is a nice kind of closing to the conversation, is that for me, it comes back to the brand, but it also comes back to the customers that you're going after. And so if you're going after customers that are dyed in the wool, local food hounds, they love it, they can't get enough of it, they're going to eat up that content about the warts and all. Here's the problems, here's the good things, etc. Ray would be an example of that. He's someone who's spent his life supporting small farmers.
Only the subscribers get that bonus content.
That's right.
Only the inner circle gets the good stuff.
And your newsletter list. Yeah.
Well, right. Yeah, actually, yes.
Yeah, they can opt in and opt out.
There you go. They're like, whoa, that's way too much, man.
One of the things that I always say, and when we talk to people out in the world, and I'll give one quick example of a branding decision. Berry containers, you have that kind of greenish pulp container, and then you have a plastic clamshell container. And I ask people, which one of these do you prefer? And of course, the crunchy people are like, the pulp one, it's biodegradable. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. Microplastic's not awesome, like, et cetera. I get it, like all of that. But if you were going to take someone, and I always use the example of like my mom, if you were going to take my mom and try to sell berries to her, she's familiar with buying berries in a clamshell. She is familiar with, this is sort of like a high quality product that will stay in my fridge for a while. So she doesn't want the warts and all. She's got enough warts and all from her own life that she doesn't want that. That's kind of the customer mindset that some people are in. And so if you're only going to be shooting to capture that local market consistently, and the people that are kind of, again, maybe they're CSA or former CSA members, they've been to the farmers market for the last 10 years or whatever, that may have some cachet, but there's a whole world of customers who really just want a high quality product and they'll pay a little bit of attention to your branding, enough to identify that you're what I'm looking for. But beyond that, keeping the focus on the product can be useful. And so I think there is a real dependence there. And you all pointed to the idea of customer segmentation, that you have some customers that want this and some customers that want this, and there's creative ways to do that.
Talked about that.
But I think as you're thinking through your brand, and you're thinking through the photos that you want to take, and the stories that you want to tell, all of this can be changed across time as you see what works and what doesn't. Take a second to think about the customers you're shooting for now, and maybe even into the future, and like, how's it going to land with them? Not how's it going to land with Brett, the local food champion, or such and such, the environmental champion, or whatever. How's it going
for the volume, baby?
A broader customer base.
Middle ground. Yeah.
What were you going to say, Alexis? You could take us out after that.
Yeah, no, I was saying, like, if you are selling lettuce and you want to show the warts of, oh no, the birds all pooped all over the lettuce, and like, obviously you're not going to sell people that bad lettuce, but you don't want it out there that it's possible that they could be getting bird poop lettuce, right? Like, that's a little bit different. Maybe after the fact, maybe lettuce season is done and then you share that. Or if you're going to do it, make it something, again, relatable. I think the way I always try and spin it, not that it's like right or wrong, but personally, I always try and spin it of like, hey, if you're struggling right now with something, we all are, right? It's something a little bit more relatable in that way. But I
think that part of the reason why, and it's something you touched on, and I wasn't going to get all, but you've inspired me here.
I brought it back up again.
And I asked the question earlier, what is the product that you're selling? You said that people want the story, and I would say they want the fantasy in some cases. And I'm going to, this might embarrass you or whatever, but I think there are people who buy the products that you sell because they want to be like you. They want to live the life that you live. And so by saying the life that you're purchasing in the form of that bouquet, or that pound of tomatoes, actually isn't that awesome. You're killing their vibe of their fantasy. Right. And we deal in so much mythology and fantasy in the world of local foods. And we have to make a decision about, to what extent do we want to perpetuate that, or do we want to allow that to happen, and how important is that? But like, almost all marketing is about, there's some degree of fantasy, that if you buy the fancy car, you'll have the beautiful woman that's in the
you have to leave room for yourself in the story, or the customers putting themselves in
their aspirations, their dreams, and there's all kinds of ethics and questions about that. But I do think that there is, you said it so well earlier, Alexis, about the idea of they're also buying the story, and that has everything to do with what your brand and the storytelling that you're doing is. So yeah.
Well, hopefully this was helpful for those of you who are just kind of trying to figure out what should you be doing in theory, or what pictures should you be taking. And I know, we talked a little bit about like specific shots, but just kind of decide what is the story you want to get out there about your product, and start there and develop shots around that. Of course, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us. Reach out via our Gmail. That's going to be in the show notes. We have a new email. If you've not used that, you can ask us some questions on there. You can also follow us at hortculturepodcast on Instagram, and we'll post some stuff up about marketing. We'll pull from sort of this marketing for all things that we've been doing over here at the CCD, and maybe some tips and tricks on that. And like I said, go follow some cool places. Follow CCD UKY for some more stuff about marketing. It's regularly scheduled. We do have those tiers that we regularly schedule, so we do practice what we preach over there. So you can go follow us. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. And I haven't said it in a while, but we would love if you would go leave us 5 stars. So if this is something that would be helpful, tell us what shots you're gonna take next for your marketing based on this convo. Leave it, and that helps other people find us, who can then also take really good photographs to put up on their website and their social media and all that jazz. So we would really appreciate it. It helps others find us. And we hope that you keep listening. We hope that as we grow this podcast, you'll grow with us, and we'll see you next time.